The summer sun cast long shadows across the Yorkshire ground as England faced their darkest hour. The year was 1881, and the third test at Headingley had become a funeral march for English cricket. Australia, led by the formidable Kim Hughes, had posted a mammoth 401 runs in their first innings. With John Dyson crafting a masterful century, the English response was nothing short of catastrophic. At 174 all-out, England's batting had crumbled like ancient parchment. The following was enforced, and when they stumbled to a pitiful 6-4-1 in their second innings, even the most optimistic Yorkshire folk began filing toward the exits. The bookmakers offered odds of 500-1 against an England victory. Two Australian players, sensing easy money, placed their bets on their own team's triumph. But cricket, like life itself, has a peculiar way of defying logic. Ian Terence Botham, the Somerset all-rounder who had recently resigned the captaincy in disgrace, strode to the crease with nothing left to lose. His reputation lay in tatters, his leadership questioned, his place in the team uncertain. Yet sometimes, when a man has fallen as far as possible, the only direction left is upward. What followed was not merely a cricket match, but a resurrection. Botham began to play with the freedom of a condemned man granted reprieve. His bat swung like a medieval mace, sending leather spheres soaring over the heads of stunned fielders. The crowd, moments before resigned to defeat, began to stir like a sleeping giant awakening from slumber. As referenced in contemporary cricket archives and match reports from the England and Wales Cricket Board, this particular innings would become the stuff of legend. Each boundary brought fresh hope. Each six sent ripples of disbelief through the stands. The Australian bowlers, so dominant hours earlier, now looked like mariners caught in an unexpected storm. Dennis Keith Lilly, the fearsome fast bowler whose very name struck terror into batsmen's hearts, found his most vicious deliveries being dispatched to all corners of the ground by close of play. Botham remained unbeaten on 149, having transformed certain defeat into improbable possibility. The following deficit had been erased, and England had posted a target that, while modest on paper, carried the weight of pure momentum. The Yorkshire crowd departed that evening with voices hoarse from cheering and hearts full of renewed faith. The fourth day would bring Bob Willis, a lanky Warwickshire fast bowler, charging down the Kirkstall Lane end like a man possessed. His figures of 8 wickets for 43 runs completed one of cricket's most extraordinary turnarounds. Australia, chasing a mere 130, collapsed to 111 all out. Defeated by 18 runs in a match they had virtually won, this victory at Headingley became more than just a cricket match, became a symbol of English resilience, of never surrendering when hope seems lost. The ghosts of that summer day would echo through the decades, inspiring future generations of cricketers to believe that no situation is truly hopeless, no opponent truly invincible. The year 1877 marked a pivotal moment in cricket's evolution, when the game's spiritual home witnessed the birth of what would become known as the Ashes rivalry. The first test match played on English soil took place at Lord's Cricket Ground. The venue that had already earned its reputation as the Cathedral of Cricket, England, faced a formidable Australian touring side that had already proven their mettle. In the colonies, the match began on a crisp September morning, with the MCC members adjusting their top hats and pocket watches as they settled into their reserved seats. The atmosphere crackled with anticipation. For this was more than sport, it was a test of imperial pride. Alfred Shaw, England's premier slow bowler, opened the attack with his characteristic accuracy. His deliveries, though seemingly gentle, possessed a deceptive cunning that had befuddled batsmen across the county circuit. The Australian batsmen, led by Captain Dave Gregory, approached their task with colonial determination, knowing that victory on English soil would send shockwaves through the empire. The match unfolded like a chess game between masters. England's batting, anchored by the elegant stroke play of Grace and the determined defense of Jupe, established a foundation of respectable solidity. But the Australians responded with equal measure, their batting displaying a raw power that contrasted sharply with the more refined English approach. as documented in the cricket chronicles of the time, particularly those preserved in the Lord's archives. This encounter established patterns that would define Anglo-Australian cricket relations for generations. The Australians brought an aggressive, almost frontier spirit to their cricket, while the English maintained their traditional emphasis on proper technique and gentlemanly conduct. The turning point came when Australia's Charles Bannerman, batting with the fury of a man defending his homeland's honor, began to dismantle the English bowling attack. His innings was a revelation, a display of controlled aggression that left the Lord's crowd simultaneously appalled and admiring. Boundaries flowed from his bat like water from a mountain spring, each stroke a statement of colonial independence. England's bowlers, accustomed to the respectful submission of county batsmen, found themselves facing opponents who showed neither deference nor fear. Tom Emmett's fast bowling, usually devastating on Yorkshire wickets, seemed to lose its sting against batsmen who had learned their craft on harder, bouncier pitches under the unforgiving Australian sun. The psychological warfare was as intense as the physical contest. Every appeal carried the weight of national pride. Every catch or dropped chance rippled through the crowd like shockwaves. The Australian fielding, sharp and athletic, contrasted with England's more ceremonial approach to the game's defensive aspects as the match progressed toward its conclusion. Both teams understood they were participating in something greater than a mere sporting contest. They were writing the first chapter of a rivalry that would consume both nations for more than a century to come. The very foundations of cricket's future were being laid in the sacred turf of Lord's, each ball bowled adding another layer to the sport's growing mythology. The Australian summer of 1932 to 1933 would forever be remembered as the season when cricket nearly destroyed diplomatic relations between two great nations. At Adelaide Oval, under the scorching South Australian sun, the third test of the series erupted into controversy that transcended sport and entered the realm of international politics. Douglas Jardine, England's steely captain with his distinctive harlequin cap, had arrived in Australia with a plan so controversial it would shake cricket to its very foundations. His strategy, dubbed bottle-in by the Australian press, involved packing the leg side with fielders, while Harold Larwood and Bill Vosey bowled short-pitch deliveries aimed directly at the batsman's body. The target was clear: Donald Bradman, the Australian batting phenomenon whose astronomical averages had made him a national hero in England's greatest nightmare. In the previous Ashes series, Bradman had humiliated English bowling attacks with scores that seemed to mock the very notion of competitive balance. Something had to be done, and Jardine believed he had found the answer. The tension had been building throughout the series, but at Adelaide, it reached breaking point. Bert Oldfield, Australia's wicket-keeper and one of cricket's most beloved figures, was struck on the head by a Larwood delivery. As he collapsed to the ground, blood streaming from his skull, the Adelaide crowd erupted in fury. Bottles rained down from the stands, and for a moment it seemed as though the match might be abandoned in riot. According to contemporary newspaper reports from the Adelaide Advertiser and other Australian publications of the era, the crowd's anger was not merely about a cricket match, but about what they perceived as unsporting English tactics designed to intimidate their national heroes. The incident became a flashpoint for deeper tensions about fair play, sportsmanship, and the proper conduct of international competition. Captain Bill Woodfull, Australia's dignified leader, made his famous declaration to the England manager: "There are two teams out there, but only one of them is playing cricket." His words, delivered with quiet intensity, captured the moral indignation that swept through Australian society. This was not just about winning or losing. It was about the soul of the game itself. Jardine, unmoved by the controversy swirling around him, maintained his tactical approach with ruthless determination. His Oxford education and aristocratic bearing made him appear coldly calculating to Australian eyes. Guilt, a symbol of English superiority. Attempting to crush colonial spirit through intimidation rather than skill, the match continued amid scenes of unprecedented hostility. Every Larwood delivery was greeted with boos and jeers from the Adelaide crowd, while English fielders found themselves subjected to a barrage of verbal abuse that would have made seasoned soldiers blush. The boundaries became a no-man's land where spectators pressed against the rope, their faces twisted with anger and patriotic fervor as the game reached its climax. With England ultimately securing victory, both teams understood that something fundamental had changed. Cricket had always prided itself on being a gentleman's game, where fair play mattered more than victory. And perhaps beyond. The diplomatic cables would soon fly between London and Canberra, threatening to sever sporting relations between the two nations. The Bottle-in series had proven that cricket was far more than entertainment. It was a mirror reflecting the deepest values and conflicts of the societies that played it. The summer of 1953 had already been touched by magic. Queen Elizabeth II had been crowned in a ceremony that captured the world's imagination. And now, at the Oval in London, England stood on the brink of reclaiming the Ashes for the first time in 19 years. The nation that had survived the darkest days of war now dared to dream of cricket glory. Len Hutton's England entered the fifth and final test knowing that a draw would be sufficient to secure the urn. But cricket rarely follows the script of mathematical certainty. And Australia, wounded and dangerous, possessed the fighting spirit that had made them the dominant force in world cricket for nearly 2 decades. The oval pitch, traditionally favoring spin bowling as matches progressed, promised to be the stage for a dramatic conclusion. England's attack was spearheaded by the Surrey duo of Alec Bedser and Tony Locke, both men who knew every blade of grass on their home ground. But Australia countered with the experience of Lindsay Hassott and the batting genius of Neil Harvey, players who had learned their craft in the harsh cauldron of post-war international competition. The match began with typical caution, both sides understanding the magnitude of what lay at stake. England's batting, marshaled by Hutton's careful accumulation and Peter May's elegant stroke play, built a foundation of respectability without ever achieving true dominance. Each run was precious, each wicket catastrophic as both teams played, with the weight of history pressing down upon their shoulders. Australia's response revealed their championship medal. Harvey, that diminutive left-handed wizard, began to weave his magic on the English bowling. His footwork against the spinning ball was poetry in motion. Each step perfectly timed, each stroke executed with mathematical precision. The Surrey crowd, partisan though they were, could not help but appreciate the artistry unfolding before them, as referenced in the detailed match reports preserved in Wisden Cricketer's Almanac. The contest ebbed and flowed like a tide with neither side. Able to establish decisive control, the tension was palpable in every corner of the Oval. From the committee rooms where elderly members clutched their brandy glasses with white knuckles, to the popular stands where working-class fans had scraped together their shillings for a glimpse of history. The decisive moment came when Dennis Compton, the Middlesex Cavalier whose batting had brought joy to war-weary England throughout the 1940s, played an innings of characteristic flair and improvisation. His partnership with Trevor Bailey, the Essex stonewaller known for his defensive prowess, provided England with the crucial runs that would prove decisive. But it was with the ball that England truly seized their destiny. Locke and Jim Laker, the Surrey spin twins, began to exploit the wearing pitch with the skill of master craftsmen. Delivery carried the hopes of a nation desperate to believe that English cricket could once again challenge the world's best. The final Australian wicket fell to wild celebrations that echoed across London and beyond. Church bells rang out from village spires across the country. Newspaper headlines screamed the joyous news, and grown men wept openly in the streets. After 19 years of Australian dominance, the Ashes had finally come home. August 25, 2019 dawned grey and overcast in Leeds. Much like England's prospects in the third Ashes test, the series stood at 2-0 to Australia, and the ghost of whitewash defeats haunted every English cricket supporter. Headingley, the ground that had witnessed Botham's heroics 38 years earlier, seemed an unlikely venue for miracles as England, following on, faced the impossible task of saving both the match and the series. Benjamin Andrew Stokes, the red-haired Durham all-rounder, had carried England's hopes on his broad shoulders throughout a career marked by both triumph and controversy. Now, with his team staring at an innings defeat, he found himself at the crease with only the tailenders for company. The situation was desperate, the odds astronomical, precedent seemingly impossible. Australia's bowling attack, led by the relentless Josh Hazlewood and the crafty Nathan Lyon, had systematically dismantled England's batting order. Pat Cummins, the Australian pace spearhead, bowled with the rhythm of a metronome, each delivery a precisely calculated instrument of destruction. The scoreboard told a story of English capitulation that had become all too familiar in recent years, but Stokes possessed something that statistics could never measure. It's an almost supernatural ability to rise to the greatest occasions. As his partners fell around him like autumn leaves, he began to play shots that defied both logic and gravity. His reverse sweeps off Lyon's off-spin were executed with the casual brilliance of a man playing in his back garden rather than the cauldron of international cricket. The crowd, initially sparse and despondent, began to grow as word spread through leads that something extraordinary was unfolding. Office workers abandoned their desks. School children pressed their faces against classroom windows. And across England, people found excuses to gather around television screens. Social media buzzed with disbelief as Stokes' score climbed ever higher, according to Sky Sports' comprehensive coverage of the match, which documented every breathtaking moment of this incredible innings. Stokes reached his century with a shot that epitomized his approach, a fierce drive that crashed into the boundary boards with the sound of thunderclap. The Yorkshire crowd erupted with a noise that seemed to shake the very foundations of the old ground, with Jack Leach, the Somerset spinner, wearing thick-rimmed glasses that made him look more like a librarian than an international cricketer, providing steadfast support at the other end. Stokes launched into an assault that would redefine the boundaries of what was possible in Test cricket. His partnership with Leach became the stuff of instant legend, a combination of brutal power and stubborn resistance that captured the imagination of cricket lovers worldwide. The Australian fielders, so confident hours earlier, now moved with the desperate urgency of men trying to hold back the tide with their bare hands. Captain Tim Paine's animated appeals and increasingly frantic field changes revealed a team feeling control slip through their fingers like sand. The match that had seemed won was suddenly balanced on a knife's edge as Stokes approached the target. The atmosphere became electric. Every ball was met with collective gasps from the crowd, every run celebrated as though it were worth 100. The mathematics of the chase became secondary to the pure drama of human will, triumphing over seemingly impossible circumstances. When the winning runs finally came, Headingley erupted in scenes that had not been witnessed since Botham's heroics decades earlier. Stokes, exhausted and emotional, raised his bat to acknowledge a crowd that understood they had witnessed something truly special, a performance that would be discussed and celebrated. Long after all, present had departed this world. The summer of 1999 brought cricket's greatest tournament to English shores. And Lord's Cricket Ground prepared to host a World Cup final that would redefine the sport's global appeal. Pakistan and Australia, two nations with contrasting cricket philosophies, stood just one match away from claiming cricket's most prestigious prize. The morning of June 9th arrived with typical English unpredictability. Patches of sunshine, interrupted by threatening clouds that promised drama both meteorological and sporting. Lords, dressed in its finest ceremonial attire, welcomed a capacity crowd that included royalty, celebrities, and cricket enthusiasts who had traveled from every corner of the cricket-playing world. Pakistan entered the final as the tournament's most compelling story, led by Wasim Akram, the left-arm fast bowler whose reverse swing had become the stuff of legend. They had overcome early struggles to emerge as genuine contenders. Their journey to the final had been marked by the kind of unpredictable brilliance that had long characterized Pakistani cricket, moments of devastating skill interspersed with periods of inexplicable vulnerability. Australia, by contrast, represented cricket's modern efficiency. Under Steve Waugh's pragmatic leadership, they had methodically dismantled every opponent with a combination of athletic fielding, aggressive batting, and relentless bowling. Their team was a well-oiled machine, each component precisely calibrated for maximum effectiveness in the shortened format of the game. The toss, won by Pakistan, gave them first use of a Lord's pitch that promised to reward disciplined bowling and patient batting. Saeed Anwar and Wajahatullah Wasty opened to Pakistan's innings with the caution of men who understood that World Cup finals forgive no mistakes. The early exchanges were tentative, both sides feeling their way into a match that would be remembered long after the last spectator had departed, as documented in contemporary cricket magazines, including Wisden Cricket Monthly. The match's decisive phases would be shaped by Pakistan's middle-order collapse and Australia's ruthless exploitation of their advantage. In Zamul-Haq, Pakistan's gifted but enigmatic batsman fell to a delivery from Damien Fleming that seemed to encapsulate the day's narrative. A moment of individual brilliance undermined by collective failure, Wasim Akram's absence through injury had robbed Pakistan of their most potent weapon, leaving them to face Australia's batting juggernaut with a depleted arsenal. When Australia began their chase, Mark was elegant stroke play and Ricky Ponting's aggressive intent quickly established a commanding platform. The Pakistani bowling, so threatening throughout the tournament, suddenly appeared toothless against batsmen who had solved their mysteries. Shane Warne, Australia's leg-spinning wizard, had earlier demonstrated why he was considered cricket's greatest showman. His dismissal of Pakistani batsmen with deliveries that seemed to defy the laws of physics reminded everyone present why cricket remained the most psychologically complex of sports. Each wicket was accompanied by his trademark celebration, a theatrical display that somehow managed to be both arrogant and irresistible. The Lord's crowd, initially neutral in their sympathies, gradually found themselves swept along by Australia's inexorable march toward victory. There was something mesmerizing about watching a team perform at the absolute peak of their powers, each player contributing to a collective performance that approached perfection. When the final Pakistani wicket fell, Australia had claimed their second World Cup triumph with a display of clinical excellence that established them as cricket's dominant force entering the new millennium. The presentation ceremony, conducted against the backdrop of Lord's historic pavilion, marked not just the end of a tournament, but the beginning of Australian cricket's golden age. July 14th. 2019 will forever be etched in the memory of every cricket lover as the day when the impossible became reality at Lord's Cricket Ground. England, the nation that had invented cricket but never won its World Cup, faced New Zealand in a final that would redefine the very limits of sporting drama. The morning brought typical English summer weather, patches of sunshine punctuated by threatening clouds that mirrored the nation's emotional state. Owen Morgan's England had endured decades of World Cup heartbreak. From the early exits of the 1970s and 80s to the devastating semi-final losses that had become their tournament trademark, this final represented perhaps their last chance to claim the prize that had eluded them for 44 years. New Zealand, led by the unflappable Kane Williamson, arrived at Lord's as cricket's most admired team. Their journey to the final had been marked by the kind of collective spirit and tactical intelligence that had made them the sport's most compelling underdogs. They played cricket the way it was meant to be played, with skill, determination, and an unwavering respect for the game's finest traditions. The match began with England posting a total of 241 runs, a score that seemed simultaneously competitive and vulnerable. Jason Roy's aggressive opening and Joe Root's elegant accumulation had given England a platform, but New Zealand's disciplined bowling, led by Trent Bolt's swing and Matt Henry's accuracy, had prevented any decisive advantage. New Zealand's chase unfolded with characteristic calm efficiency. Williamson's captaincy was a masterclass in tactical awareness. Each bowling change and field placement calculated with chess-like precision. Henry Nicholls and Tom Latham built partnerships with the patience of master craftsmen, understanding that World Cup finals are won by those who make the fewest mistakes rather than the most spectacular shots. As the match entered its final overs, the tension at Lord's became almost unbearable. Every ball carried the weight of national expectations. Every run was celebrated or mourned with an intensity that transcended mere sport. The MCC members in the pavilion, normally models of reserved dignity, found themselves on their feet, their usual composure shattered by the drama unfolding before them. The climax came in the final over. When England needed 15 runs for victory, with only their lower order remaining, Ben Stokes, the hero of countless previous rescues, faced the impossible task of scoring at a rate that seemed to mock the laws of cricket mathematics. What followed was pure theater boundaries that brought Lords to its feet, dot balls that induced collective gasps and moments of pure chance that seemed orchestrated by cricketing gods. As extensively covered in The Guardian's match report and BBC Sports ball-by-ball commentary, the final over will be remembered as perhaps the most dramatic six balls in cricket history. Stokes' desperate dive to complete the second run that resulted in an accidental boundary off his bat created a moment of controversy and fortune that epitomized the match's extraordinary nature. When the scores finished level after 50 overs, the crowd's disbelief was matched only by the players' exhaustion. A super over, cricket's equivalent of a penalty shootout, would decide the destination of cricket's greatest prize. England batted first, with Stokes and Joe's Butler scoring 15 runs that seemed both magnificent and insufficient against New Zealand's proven ability to chase under pressure. New Zealand's super over began with the confidence of a team that had already achieved the impossible by reaching the final. But as wickets fell and the required rate climbed, the dream began to fade. When the final ball was bowled and the scores were still tied, England claimed victory through the arcane rule of boundary count, back a method that seemed almost cruel in its arbitrary nature. The celebrations that followed were tinged with sympathy for New Zealand, whose dignified acceptance of defeat earned them admiration that transcended the result. For England, the victory represented the culmination of a 4-year journey that had transformed them from World Cup laughingstock to champions of the world. At Lords, under threatening skies that never quite delivered rain, cricket had produced a final worthy of its greatest stage.